Assignment Education on KET is made possible with generous support from
the Neighbor Carter Group at Baird. Wealth management with quality, perspective, honesty, and integrity. The Neighbor Carter Group.rwbaird.com.
I'm Sam Corbett on Assignment Education, where we cover stories in Kentucky schools with a focus on good news. This time, a new law that aims to give kids a chance to make up for lost time.
So much stuff that's been lost.
Plus, a program started by Dolly Parton in Tennessee takes root in Kentucky, putting books in the hands of kids across the state.
They could get 60 books between birth and age 5.
And up first, an aggressive plan to reduce childhood poverty. It's part of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan passed by Congress. With me now to talk about how the plan will impact Kentucky is Dr. Terry Brooks, the Executive Director of Kentucky Youth Advocates.
Hey Sam, it's great to be with you today.
Well, thanks for joining us, Terry. To start out, tell us a little bit about Kentucky Youth Advocates.
Sure. Kentucky Youth Advocates is a nonpartisan, nonprofit group that sees itself as the independent voice for Kentucky's kids. So when policies come up, whether that's in Washington or in Frankfurt, we try to be there as sort of the kids' chief lobbyist in Kentucky.
So we've heard a lot about this stimulus bill that's come from the federal government, and we've also heard how it may potentially impact child poverty. To begin with, talk to us about what's the current situation, or what's been the current situation around child poverty in Kentucky.
Yep. You know, Sam, if we were talking a year ago, you would have heard me say that for the first time in years, the trend line for economic well-being in kids in Kentucky was on the right course. Doesn't mean we didn't have more than 200,000 kids living in poverty, but the trend line was going the right direction. The pandemic just blew that away. The last data that we have, which is only about a month and a half old, so fairly timely, reliable, credible, suggests that 2 out of 3 Kentucky families have significantly less income than a year ago. 38% of Kentucky families indicate that they don't know if they will have a place to live in a month. And I think the stat that blows me away is almost 1 in 4 kids in Kentucky did not have enough to eat last week. So the pandemic has really produced a tsunami of poverty, frankly, for families who never thought they would be in this situation.
Can you give us some specifics of how this piece of legislation is going to help these families that you just talked about?
Yes, it is not hyperbolic to say that this is the most significant piece of legislation ever in terms of impacting poverty, kids in Kentucky. We all hear about that direct payment, which is certainly an important feature. We hear about deepening benefits, such as extending unemployment benefits. We hear about things like SNAP, the old food stamp program, that's been deepened. A couple arenas that really grab my attention, for instance, is that the concept of a child care credit, which really means that child tax credit just owns the fact that it costs money to have kids. We all know that. We know that that will help 93% of kids in Kentucky. So just that one piece from this voluminous bill is going to impact more than 9 out of 10 Kentuckians. The other thing that intrigues me about this bill is what I would call subtle supports. So for instance, there is a real focus on giving families support for child care. We know that over half the kids in Kentucky live in a child care desert. This kind of support from Washington is going to make high quality child care more accessible. We know that that has a multiplicative effect because that impacts workforce capacity, family employment. The other area that I think is so important to note is some tax policies that are absolutely bipartisan. The Earned Income Tax Credit, a concept supported by Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, pretty bipartisan, has been expanded significantly in this piece of legislation. That particular measure allows low-income working families to simply hold on to more of their resources. So whether it's around benefits, direct payments, or tax policy, this particular piece of legislation is really bold, is really deep, and will carry deep impact for Kentucky.
You are a career educator. You and I met and started working together more than 30 years ago. Talk a little bit, explain to the viewer how poverty impacts a child's performance in school.
Sure. You know, my hypothesis has always been that unless and until we begin to address childhood poverty, we're not going to address the overall well-being of kids. We know that economic well-being has a direct impact on academic achievement, a major influence of health outcomes, a contributor to whether a child lives in a safe or an abusive environment. So it's the big kahuna. Poverty, economic well-being are the drivers. In terms of that classroom per se, we know that if I'm one of those 1 in 4 kids in Kentucky who didn't have enough to eat, frankly, neither multiplication nor writing a paragraph is going to mean a whole lot to me. So we can talk a lot about the elements of effective education, and you and I both are committed to those. But unless and until we begin to address core and deep poverty in the Commonwealth, we really are not getting to the base, to the foundation of what every learner needs in every county in Kentucky.
This piece of legislation will impact, say, the next 12 to 18 months. Mm-hmm. What do you anticipate happens beyond that period of time?
We'd be very naive if we thought that recovery from the economic crisis that families are facing is a microwave proposition. I think it's more of a crock pot proposition. So I hope that our federal legislators start thinking ahead of the curve, assessing what is the landscape, which of these provisions seem to be producing the most significant results. That's an important question to ask. And then let's think about another chapter. The correlate to that is I really hope that leaders of the state Senate and state House, as well as Governor Beshear, can come together in a common ground, common sense way and think about what can we emulate from that federal package. As an example, more than 24 states have a refundable state earned income tax credit. Kentucky does not. If we wanted to dramatically impact poverty in Kentucky for working families on a long-term basis, we would get serious about a refundable state earned income tax credit. It would set up a system to contribute to Kentucky's economic well-being for decades to come.
Well, Dr. Brooks, thanks so much for spending some time with us today and helping us better understand the impact that this legislation is going to have, and I should say the very positive impact that this legislation is going to have. And let me thank you and your entire team at Kentucky Youth Advocates for the great work that you all do in helping Kentuckians understand the challenges that we have with children in our state.
Well, Sam, thanks, and we always appreciate your focus on kids and especially the positive angle you give, because there are so many good things going on for kids in Kentucky. We can't let the headlines or the pandemic let us forget those positives.
Thank you. Another piece of legislation coming out of Frankfort is giving kids a chance to make up for lost time and lost learning that happened because of COVID-19. It's known as the DoOver Bill.
So much stuff that's been lost.
Senator Max Wise is the chairman of Kentucky's Senate Education Committee, sponsoring a bill to offer K-12 students a do-over year if they choose.
Both the public and private schools, grades K through 12, the ability to apply for a supplemental holdback year. Essentially, it's a do-over bill in some aspects, and the bill came about basically from a lot of different angles. I look at it as one who has had 4 children of my own have to go through the past year of lives in the school system, of seeing how COVID-19 has basically been such a ravage to so many people, for parents, for students, for teachers, administrators, and the like. And I heard from so many people about the effects that COVID-19 was having on children. And I thought, what can we do? What can I do as a legislator? And a lot of it was how we gavelled out last session, not knowing what the impact of COVID-19 was truly going to be. I think most of us thought that it was going to be 2 weeks, maybe a month, and we get right back in a routine. And, you know, as a parent who was having to talk to my kids, I was like, don't worry about it. When we roll back around in August, we'll be all good to go. We'll get through the summer, and wasn't that way. And so I look at Senate Bill 128 as the ability for some families to have that choice and what's best for their child. You know, we look at the mental health of these children, we look at reading, we look at math skills, and so much stuff that's been lost. And I thought, what can I do? And so this basically just came about as an idea of opening this up. Initially, we thought it was grades 9 through 12, because for most K through 8 students, the ability to hold back was a given. Some school districts already did that. But we thought, you know what, let's look at this from a high school angle. But then more questions started to come about of, you know, what about those that have children? And some districts do not allow a holdback for those kids. And I thought, let's expand it. Let's make it K through 12. And but then you also open up discussions on extracurricular activities, athletics, so many things that come about with a holdback. And a lot of questions came about from the Kentucky Department of Education, the Kentucky School Board Association, Kentucky Superintendents, Kentucky High School Athletic Association. So I was, you know, very cognizant of their concerns. I worked with them every step of the way. And I think what we have and what the ability is to work with local school districts on allowing, once again, that choice for those families to make.
So, Senator, is there any penalty for the student if they choose to do this?
I don't see it as a penalty. I see it as an opportunity. Once again, if the child wishes to do so, I think the learning gap of what's been lost this whole academic year is immeasurable. I'm not for sure if any study, any data is really going to say what effect has this had on a child. And that's at every different grade level. I think some people could say, you know what, those seniors really missed out this year on so much opportunity. But then you also could say, well, look at the building blocks at that K through 3rd grader. So when I look at this, that's why the expansion of K through 12th grade was so important to do. We look at some students that were in our area technology centers, the ATCs. They've not gotten hands-on welding experience. Right. I don't see it as a penalty, but I see it as if a child wishes to do so, it's an opportunity. It's not a mandate. We're not forcing every K through 12 student to have to repeat. Only those that wish to say, you know what, I maybe could use a little help, and this bill will give me the opportunity.
I know this would just be a guess, but do you have any sense of what percentage of our student population might choose to do this? And then secondly, would you predict that most of the school districts will approve this?
First question, you know, in terms of looking at the grade levels, I think most seniors are already one step out the door. I think most seniors have said, you know what, this has been a cruddy year. I don't know if I want to come back for another year, because we don't know what the future holds for next year. I hate to say that, but it looks like we're maybe getting to the end of a tunnel of COVID, but do we really know where the tunnel, how far it goes? I do think that most districts, if this is going to be utilized, will be through K through 8th grade, maybe some freshmen and sophomores that wish to do this over again. We had a superintendent testify from Greene County School District, Will Hodges. Mr. Hodges actually did a parent survey. He found that was probably about 3% to 5% of 9th through 12th graders that would really look to do this. Not a huge budget issue at all. It's indeterminable about what that would be for students that wish to come back. I do think most school districts will give this a lot of thought if they wish to have this for their school district or not. I can't say how many would choose to do it, but I think that ends up being the parents and how vocal they wish to be to the local school board of accepting this or not.
Right. Let me ask you to put another hat on. Take your Senate hat, and slide over to the side, and put your parent hat on. What has your family's experience been through the last year or so related to the whole NTI, distance learning? And you've got fairly young children, as I recall, primarily in elementary school. What's it been like for you all?
Well, my kids are 12th grade, 9th grade, 7th grade, 4th grade. So I don't think there's a legislator up here that's got a child in every section of a school district like I do. It's been like a pinball machine where you're bouncing off bumpers. It's kind of been like a yo-yo of where you're up top and then you're right at the bottom. My children have seen every type of learning mechanism. They've seen full in-person to start the year, jump to a 2-day-a-week hybrid, then jump to all virtual, now just getting back into some form of in-person just recently. That's no, once again, blame on our school district and our teachers and everyone who's trying to do their best. A lot of that's just having to listen to the health department and some things that are happening because of the numbers and where they were. I will say as a parent, it's been one of the most hard, gut-wrenching things I've ever seen. I've seen my kids say they wish they could be with their classmates more often. I've seen some of my kids who are student athletes see games taken away, not because of them, because you play COVID roulette. You know, if a basketball team tests positive and all of a sudden your team gets quarantined or the other team gets quarantined, you miss out on games. And so, you know, my kids have seen the full run of the gambit. My daughter, who's a senior, keeps asking, do I get a prom and do I get a graduation? Because her friends last year got neither. And you don't want that prom dress to sit for another year. But, you know, those are things that that age group has memories of. Those are things they live with. And for most of us as adults, we think it's trivial. Yeah, I get over it. You know, it's just prom. Yeah, but to some 17 or 18-year-old daughters, that's a tough thing to say, you know, you can't get it this year.
Right. Well, I spent more than 40 years in my family business renting tuxedos. So the prom is extremely important from my standpoint.
Yes.
You know, you can't recreate your senior year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And you know, you can't recreate kindergarten. You know, you can't recreate fourth grade for so many kids. And I think last year's kids also saw that. Fourth graders saying, can I go back and see my friends for the last 2 months? And then to start the year the way it's been. And every district's different. You know, some have been on virtual this whole time. I can't imagine child care issues, working parents trying to accommodate. So that's the purpose of 128. You know, I kind of took this as the heart of a dad, also saying, you know, not every family's going to do this. And this bill's not for every family, but if this helps any family to be able to get that year back, I'm all for that.
Right. Last question. You're an educator, parent. I'm hearing a lot of people voice concern about not necessarily the academic impact of the kids being out, but the social emotional part of this. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we don't know for some families what happens behind closed doors, and I think that's been a tough thing for social workers, school counselors that have lost touch with some of these children over this past year. That's something, once again, that we don't know if the data or research will ever show what this has impacted so many children out there. And when we bring them back in, you know, I think the in-person, the nurturing, the love they get from those teachers is something you can't get from a computer screen. And the ability for that child to be able to see their friends, have some normalcy, be on the playground together, that's what a lot of times, you know, education is about too, of developing those life skills. And so I really hope that once we're back in a routine, get these kids back into school, that's going to be where the guidance counselors, the school psychologists, the school social workers have really got to, you know, look at this in terms of how much of an impact has this had on the kids.
Right. Senator Max Wise, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate talking with you, and thank you for the service you and our other legislators provide the Commonwealth in what are obviously unprecedented times, and particularly in the education space. I appreciate your efforts and everything you do.
Sam, thank you. Appreciate the interview.
One way to guarantee success on a child's journey of education is to get them reading early. That's exactly the mission of Imagination Library, a program started by Dolly Parton in Tennessee and now growing here in Kentucky. I'm with Bill Shorey today, one of the founders of Imagination Library Louisville. Bill, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Sam.
What is Imagination Library?
So Imagination Library, in the larger sense, is in the sense of the international program, was founded by Dolly Parton in 1995 to honor her father who never learned to read. And what she did was decide that she was going to send a free, age-appropriate book to every child in her home county of Sevier County, Tennessee, which many people here, of course, are familiar with because of Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge. And that program was very successful and very well received. And what they figured out was that once she had done all the programming and selected the books and gotten the group together to pick the books and figure out how to do the mailing and so forth and so on, Once you've done one county, it's pretty easy to do 2 counties. And once you've done 2, it's pretty easy to do 4. And once you've done 4, you could do 4,000, which is roughly where we are now in 5 different countries and several thousand programs around the world.
So the program in Louisville is relatively new.
Absolutely. Now we started working on it in 2013. Actually, when I arrived here from Knoxville, where my daughter was about halfway through the program, we got here and we thought, okay, well, we need to transfer her Imagination Library book, or Imagination Library membership to Louisville, and we found out it wasn't here and decided that would be a really great program to take on.
So explain to the folks how the program works.
So it's entirely free, and anybody with children from birth to age 5 can sign up their child, and we'll mail them a book every month with their child's name on it. It's not need qualified, it's not income qualified, it's not based on any other criteria other than living in one of the zip codes that we cover and being the right age. So that makes it easy, lowers the barrier of entry because we don't need a lot of data from people. We need their name, we need their address, we need the age of the kid. And the book shows up in the mailbox with the child's name on it. And that is a big deal because if you can think back, if something showed up in the mailbox with your name on it at that age, you were either going to learn to read that or you were going to find somebody to read it to you, but it was going to be a big deal to you.
So you mentioned that when you all moved here that your daughter was in the program. Now, she's obviously grown out of the program, but what was her experience like?
Well, she loved it. And, it was a big event when the books arrived every month from birth even. She just developed a relationship with these books. And she's now 12, and she's moved on to all sorts of things, Harry Potter and well beyond that. But those Dolly books are still in a special place in her bookcase. Those still mean something to her, that those arrived with her name on it, and that sort of began her relationship with books.
And isn't it true that for many of the children that are part of the program, not just in the Louisville area, but worldwide, that these books they receive may be the only books that are in their house?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you think about it, if a child gets signed up early enough, and it would have to be very close to or before their actual date of birth, they could get 60 books between birth and age 5. And, frankly, there are some homes where that would bring the total number of books to 60. And there are all kinds of great research. I mean, no end of research that links not only early childhood literacy, but overall economic well-being and just professional achievement to having high-quality reading materials accessible in the home. And that's what we're making possible with this program.
So you mentioned maybe 4,000 counties around the country that are participating in the program. This is available in other places in Kentucky.
Absolutely, and more all the time. When we first started this back in 2017, I remember there were a total of 7 in our viewing area. That number is now up to about 20. Across Kentucky, there's several dozen programs, especially in eastern Kentucky, but all over the state, there's several dozen programs where it's accessible, but not entirely, not every county is covered at this point.
Can you envision a scenario in the future where this would be made available to every child in the state of Kentucky?
Yeah, we'd love to, and there are states where that's the case. It's been the case in Tennessee for a long time through a public-private partnership. But here in the last couple of years, there have been several states that have invested on the state government level in simply participating in the program for every child in their state. We would love to see that happen in Kentucky.
So one last question, other than the experience that you all had with your daughter, share with us another comment or another experience you've heard about from a family member or a child, just the way they reacted to being involved.
I love to tell the story about one of our new board members, Tiffany Fitzpatrick, who actually experienced it through the family scholar house. And her son, Princeton, she enrolled him in the program early, and she just talks about how excited he would get, and he would just jump up and down when the books would arrive, and he just absolutely developed a relationship with these books in a way that totally changed the trajectory of just his academic pursuits. And he's just recently graduated, but he's excelling and she's excelling, and it's given her the passion to advocate for the program, and through that the opportunity to do so as she's joined our board. So this thing impacts not only the kids but really entire families as they experience reading those books together.
Well, Bill, thanks for your time today. Great program, great success fairly early in the program, and hopefully we can reach the goal of every child in Kentucky.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for your support as well.
I'm Sam Corbett, and we'll see you again with more good news from our local schools on Assignment Education. Assignment Education on KET is made possible with generous support from
the Vay-Neighbor Carter Group at Baird. Wealth management with quality, perspective, honesty, and integrity. The Vay-Neighbor Carter Group.rwbaird.com.